Thank you. Other duties as assigned. Mr. Alexander, your witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. Your Honor, I would just like to go back for something for introduction. 3802, which I couldn't put my finger on, follows a staple part that starts with 3801.
So we're on 3801?
Oh, I'm just going to have 3802 marked.
Okay.
And this was sponsored by you, correct? 38,
Yes.
The response to 38-02?
Yes.
All right, and are there any changes you would make to it?
No.
Okay.
All right, Mr. Alexander, we're marking this as Exhibit 18.
Okay.
I don't have the attachments in front of me, but
Your counsel should feel free to add them in after your testimony, and I have no objection to it.
I'll defer to counsel. I just would note that I just have the data request in front of me.
Yes, I'm
Okay.
saying
Okay.
it can be filled in as far as I'm concerned. I wouldn't want anything to do that. Okay, you have a packet. You have a packet of some that are stapled, and it begins with 36-13.
All right, Mr. Alexander, I'm confused. I thought we were on 3802.
Your Honor, I don't have to ask him any more questions about it. It was just that I couldn't find it.
Oh, all right, all right. What document are we on now, sir?
Okay, 36, Settlement DR, OPC, Settlement Data Request 36-13. So this is just quick, Your Honor. Oh, did you sponsor this 36-13?
The copy I have in front of me says counsel, but I believe
Go ahead. I think counsel.
I believe that was updated. And yes, my recollection, assuming I could get nothing has changed.
Yes.
What I'm looking at, yes, I did.
Well, there are some things, and I'm going to give you the opportunity to look at it. At the time this was filed, on January 23, a week ago, you said that Transource PA, it's on the second page, currently intends to file a joint amended application with the Pennsylvania Utilities Commission within the next week. Now, based on the testimony we had already, that is filed, correct?
Yes, I would just ask if you're going to ask me questions about the updated data request, that we look at that together. I believe that was updated in here and
Yes,
speaks for itself.
right. Well, it was filed, right?
Yes.
Okay, good. The western portion of the IEC project in Pennsylvania has been consolidated with the eastern portion. Is that correct and up to date?
Which one are you?
I'm on D.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I'm on E.
Subject to verifying that was not updated as well. That's what it says, yes.
Well, do you know or don't know? I'm sorry.
My understanding is the western portion was consolidated, yes.
Okay. Now, if you go to G, the question is, and it's still on that same page, and we're still talking about the OPC DR 36-13, the settlement DR. If you take a look at G, the question, will Transource Maryland commence construction of the Maryland eastern portion of the line, even if no disposition via order, settlement, or otherwise has occurred with the eastern Pennsylvania portion of the IEC East? Do you see that?
I do.
Okay, now if you go to look at your response in G, it says Transource Maryland will begin construction when it receives authorization to do so. Is that correct? That states that.
That is what it says. I would also add that under the settlement proposal, which is subject to approval with this commission, if the settlement proposal is approved, Transource Maryland has no line on the eastern portion. So that question is answered that way because there are two configurations right now pending before the commission.
The authorization that you're talking about in this answer, is that authorization of the Maryland Commission?
Subject to any line construction in Maryland, yes.
Okay, so BGE is constructing this portion of IEC, a certain portion in Maryland of IEC East, correct?
They are under the settlement proposal, yes.
Okay. Under the settlement proposal, if Transource application here and BGE's coordinate application is approved, the CPCN will be issued. But Pennsylvania has not yet made a determination on the Pennsylvania PPL part of the line. Will BGE, if you know, start construction?
I believe that question would be best directed to the BG&E witness. I believe they're up next.
Okay. Okay, we can skip OPC 27-02 because I think they've been answered already, so I don't think I need it in the record. And so just a quick question about this. The exhibit to your BDWS1 is Exhibit B to the settlement agreement, correct?
Exhibit BDWS1 is the settlement agreement. You said Exhibit B. That would be Exhibit B to BDWS1 as I read it. Yes.
Yes, okay. And just to make sure I'm understanding, are these figures the same that were calculated for the original 9A?
I believe I've answered that. My understanding of this, subject to any clarification from the PJM witnesses, which would have prepared this table, is that this allocation pertains to the settlement configuration. I would have to go pull the original configuration and put it side by side.
Okay, thank you. If you go to your reply testimony at page 3, if you take a look at, and I don't have the line, but it starts
bear with me. Page 3.
Sure, absolutely. I'm sorry.
Commission maybe as well. Okay, I'm on my reply, page 3.
Yes, settlement reply, page 3, correct?
Yes.
Okay. There's a sentence there, a paragraph that starts with indeed, comma, rather than abating.
Line 4.
Yes.
I see it, yes. Thank you.
Okay, what I want to ask you, rather than getting into detail, I'll start with this first. Are you basically summarizing what either Mr. Horger or Mr. Hurling's testimony is, and that this is not within your direct knowledge? In other words, should I pass this on to Mr. Horger or Mr. Hurling, or can I ask you questions about it?
This line of questioning, the preceding sentence says, is further discussed by Mr. Horger. I was relying on Mr. Horger's analysis in my summarization here. So I believe you should ask Mr. Horger.
Okay, and you also indicate later this is further addressed by Mr. Hurling. May I assume the same thing, that I should save the question about this part for Mr. Hurling?
Yes, the part that pertains on line 8 and 9 to significant reliability violations are covered by PJM witness hurling.
Okay, thank you. I'm just about home, Your Honor. If you would go to your reply, where we already are at page 5, the question posed to you is, are there any other costs to Maryland customers that would result from a further project delay? Correct?
I see that at line 1, yes.
And on line 3, your answer starts with, yes, in addition to the significant congestion course and reliability risks that delay would cause, there were real project costs that would result from further delay. And in the rest of the paragraph, you talk about what those additional costs are, correct?
Yes.
Okay. In terms of the delay cost, including debt, equity, carrying of CWIP, construction work in project, about how much are these costs?
I don't have an itemized portion. I'm projecting to the commission. I would have to have, what is the delay if I were to try to quantify the cost of any delay. But we are incurring costs on an ongoing basis.
Okay, so should the commission permit citing of a $500 million construction cost of a transmission, excuse me, let me do that again. Should the commission permit citing of a $500 million estimated construction cost of a transmission line because of those additional costs?
Are you talking about an abstract $500 million, or are you asking about the 9A project?
Oh, I'm asking about the 9A project, which is close to 500 million. I think it's 496 million. I didn't mean to confuse you.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. I believe the commission should, my recommendation would be the commission should approve this project because of the significant benefits that it incurs to the customers of Maryland and the surrounding regions to the tune of $844 million of projected benefits.
Mr. Alexander, is that your question?
No,
Okay. Ask your question. Let's try one more time succinctly so the witness
let's
can
try one
understand.
more time. Should the commission, in your view, permit citing of the estimated construction cost of Project 9A without knowing the amounts of these additional costs that you refer to at page 5?
I can't speak to the hypothetical. What we put forward in testimony here is a projected in-service date of May of 21 for the west and May of 22 for the east, and the costs put forward in my testimony outline our projected current estimate based on significant diligence and actually receipt of a lot of firm fixed costs. I would need to know. Your question appears to represent a hypothetical of should the commission approve costs from a delay, and I would need to know the specifics of any.
Well, I'm just trying to follow your testimony. You say that the commission should consider these additional costs of legal expenses and construction work in progress, etc. And all I asked you is that should then, based on your testimony, shouldn't the commission obtain those costs before making a decision in this case on the settlement agreement? That's all.
Our current projection is as outlined in testimony is our projection of costs. And the reason for my testimony is specifically to rebut the implication that was put forward in, I believe, it was the testimony of witness Smith that said we should just delay and I would say do ongoing analysis. And the implication was that's at no cost. The costs are real. The threat to the regional grid is also real. 2023 is very close, and it's important we get a project in service that avoids that reliability violation that's projected, and the significant benefits that also accrue to the state of Maryland. I believe, as a reference point, over the last 9 months, as outlined in the testimony of witness Horger, it was about $100 million in additional congestion costs on top of the costs I outlined here. So,
Mr. Weber, isn't it true that in your testimony you stated in response to Mr. Smith's testimony that there would be more unknown cost that would be incurred by consumers if there were delay?
yes, that is correct.
Does that provide your answer, Mr. Alexander?
Yes, and I have just one follow-up, I think.
And then we're home?
Yeah, and you know what, Your Honor? We're home.
Excellent. Thank you. Any redirect?
No, Your Honor.
Thank you. Examination by the commissioners. Seeing none to my left, to my right, Commissioner O'Donnell. Oh, yes. Yield to Commissioner Richard.
I'm going first. All right. First of all, welcome. Thank you for your
Thank you.
testimony today.
Good morning. Yeah.
Want to be cordial. Let's say, just was interested on, a few things. One, throughout your testimony, you talk about how this project will support renewables and some of the goals of the state of Maryland. I think on page 2,
Yeah.
you stated also support. I'm just going to summarize.
Sure.
If you think
Fair
I'm
enough.
way off, then please
Yeah,
stop
no.
me. But I think support renewable and energy goals in Maryland. Page 4 enables more renewable resources development and operation. 12, facilitate delivery and interconnection of renewable energy. So that's I think I'm
Yeah.
appropriately talking, at least talking about your testimony. Can you, I was looking through the previous hearing testimony and yours. Are there any specific studies or analysis or anything you can direct me to get a little more granularity on how exactly this project will do just that?
Yeah, so my statements rely on the technical expertise of PJM, and I think there was some dialogue at the live evidentiary hearings about some scenarios where that could occur. One scenario that my recollection was discussed is there's a significant potential for the interconnection of offshore wind on the Delmarva Peninsula, and I believe it was witness Hurling talked about how the flows of delivering that power would flow up and around using the regional transmission grid. The PJM witnesses would be best to talk to this
Okay.
further, but I do understand that the current CARES bill that's currently being contemplated of a 70% clean energy amount would also significantly rely upon delivery through the regional transmission grid. I don't know what specific studies have been done on the emerging bill, but I do know that PJM is aware of it.
Okay, well, fair enough. Since it's asserted a number of times as
Yes.
one of the I guess basically two benefits. One is the congestion cost, but then also the renewable, the fact that this will meet the state's goals. And so you're just basing off of the previous or reports and from PJM.
Yeah, previous reports from PJM, as well as I have had significant discussions with PJM as far as what their current feelings were. I don't want to think that they'd be best to characterize their current view of that.
Okay.
Yeah.
We also, you're aware that the OPC talks about how the future market conditions, could change. So, am I correct that the 800, more than $800 million in benefit, do have a certain assumption about what the future market conditions are going to look like?
Yes,
That's correct.
Yes, that's correct. And over time, PJM continues to incorporate that into their future planning process. And yes, yeah. So they'd be probably best situated to answer that. But what I can say is, as over time those inputs have been updated, this project has continued to show tremendous benefit. I think it's actually growing right now. So
Okay.
yeah.
Right, and so some of that variation could be, if customers, in fact, take advantage of Maryland's energy efficiency programs, we continue to promote, and we'll probably into our next cycle, Empower cycle, be promoting demand response, and then we've significantly, our legislature has significantly increased our renewable requirements. So that could add a significant variable, change to these forecasts. Is that correct?
Yeah, I believe the energy efficiency and demand response have already been incorporated into the forecast. And as PJM, I think would be best situated to testify
fair
that the delivery of those renewables would greatly rely upon the transmission grid. So.
Okay. Yeah, it sounds like they can hold most of these questions. Let me just look to see if I had anything else. And so reliability, you also assert about this will improve it, a pending reliability concern as well.
Yes, there's as outlined in the PGM white paper, there's a 500 kV. It's an N-0, which means there's no outages at all, overload on a system, and I think PGM would be best situated to talk to the severity of that, but it's a large magnitude reliability issue. Yeah.
And that could also, and I think you're answering the question, this is more PGM, but future market conditions could also have an impact on whether or not this impending reliability issue materializes. It could be impacted. We may not have the reliability issue if those projections are incorrect as far as future demand, future market conditions.
Yeah, I can't speak to the specifics of what may or may not happen under different futures. What I can say is PJM incorporates those on a real time, or an updated basis into their planning process, and the reliability violation, as I understand it, is a very significant one. So
it's not here yet. It's only projected to happen possibly in 2022. I think is what the testimony is.
Yeah, 2023 is the
2023.
yes.
So it's a little.
It's pretty in transmission land. That's pretty close for it. Takes a long time to site these facilities.
And so obviously we have this market efficiency project before us, but would you agree there could be other solutions to the reliability solution, or to address the reliability issues? I mean, we don't know yet if what we're talking about now is the most efficient or direct way of dealing with the reliability solution. It just, if I'm understanding correctly, it just so happens that this market efficiency project could also address the reliability concerns in 2023.
Yeah, to use basketball speak, if I may, it's kind of an and one. So the project provides significant benefits to Maryland on its own. In addition, without any additional cost, it also solves a significant reliability violation. Witness Hurling, I think, could talk to this more directly, but his technical estimation would be that an outage or a reliability violation of that severity would require a significant upgrade, likely a greenfield line.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much for your answers.
You're welcome.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Weber, welcome back.
Thank you.
I wanted to ask you about the project in terms of costs incurred to date. So, isn't it true that if the plug were pulled on the life of this project today, or just for argument's sake, that certain costs that have been accrued, including maybe some of the ones you list on page 5 of your reply testimony that counsel for People's Counsel, Office of People's Counsel was asking you about, aren't they, if prudently incurred, eligible for a return of and a return on those costs if the project were stopped today?
Yeah, so first off, our intention is, certainly our expectation is this project would go forward, but in the unforeseen outcome of the project not moving forward, Transource Maryland has received an order from the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission for protection against abandonment, and those costs, we would seek recovery of those costs that were prudently incurred as a result of any proceeding.
Sure, and we had those experience with other transmission projects that came out of PJM in the last maybe several decades, maybe not that long ago, that did have the plug pulled on them, and Marylanders incurred tens of millions of dollars of expenses for exactly this reason. Is that not correct? Do you know?
There are other examples of costs being recovered that the projects were abandoned. What I would say for this project, it's gone through 6 reevaluations under the PJM process. It's passed the benefit to cost hurdle every single time without even incorporating the and one I referenced earlier of solving the reliability violations. So I wouldn't put this project in a similar situation of other projects that were that you may be referring to, because this project has gone through so many rigorous and recurring reevaluations.
Well, the fact of the matter is, the Pennsylvania Commission or the Maryland Commission could deny a CPCN, and that
They
would
could.
effectively stop the project.
They could. Yes.
So they do apply if for any reason, arguendo, these projects are stopped, right? They are similar.
Yes. If the project were to be canceled, Transource Maryland would seek recovery of prudently incurred costs.
And do you know what those what those costs are to date? How much are Maryland how much are Maryland ratepayers on the hook for so far?
I can't speak for the Maryland ratepayers part, because this project serves not only Maryland but the surrounding regions. But I can talk in general. We have incurred about $35 million to date in moving this project forward, and then in addition we have entered into firm price contracts, which would take cost to unwind, and I can't quantify that exactly here today.
Okay. Is that data readily available? I mean, do you account for that on an ongoing basis?
Yes, we provide quarterly reports to PJM, and that's one of the areas that we report on. And we pay attention to those costs very, very frequently. Our intention is to deliver our obligations under the designated entity agreement to ensure we're positioned to deliver this project, but also do so in a prudent way. And we measure and think very hard about every cost before we incur them.
All right. I want to consider. I may have a bench data request for Transource, but I'm not sure yet.
Okay.
Commissioner Herman.
Good afternoon, Mr. Weber.
Good afternoon.
I'm going to ask you some general questions, and then we'll head into the testimony and the settlement. Do you have mouth easements for either IEC West or IEC East?
So we don't for IEC East, because under the settlement proposal we would not construct. That would be BG&E. For IEC West, there are 3 land parcels which have a Maryland Agricultural Land Preservation Foundation, or MALF, encumbrances, and those 3 are owned by 2 landowners. We have acquired voluntary options from each of those landowners and are working through with the landowners the requisite needed petition to the MALF authority for an overlay.
But you don't have those yet?
No.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Kelly has said, I asked him about it, I think you were here.
Yes.
Asked about the exemption for forest conservation. Do you know if you have that at this point?
My understanding is we are working through the final plan to do that. We're in active conversations to do that. I'm not directly involved in that, but I did check on that before.
Okay, that's okay. Just curious.
Yeah.
Mr. Smith has said that that the zonal allocation is unclear at this point. Has that been clarified yet? Do you know?
I would say that the zonal allocation, as I understand, this is really a PJM. It's covered under the PJM operating agreement, so the specifics of that would probably be best directed there. My understanding is the zonal allocation is clear. It's put forward as outlined under the original petition.
Okay, thank you. In the settlement, it says that Transource will use reasonable efforts to provide PJM analysis. And I could find the settlement agreement where it says that. There it is, 18, paragraph 18.
Thank you for that.
Sure. It says reasonable efforts to have the PJM provide the Commission updated reliability analysis. Can you explain to me why the analysis that OPC's requested wouldn't fit into that paragraph?
I believe this paragraph references the obligation we have as an applicant under under the Maryland regulations to ensure that it doesn't affect reliability or stability of the system, and we wanted to make sure that as we went forward, and the settlement configuration, if there was anything that changed, that we would be able to certainly say it meets those requirements. I think the PJM witnesses can talk specifically to that. What I can say is the required analysis, or the requested targeted analysis requested by the OPC, in my understanding, actually causes that to be violated. So it would cause reliability violations, and that's known.
Okay. The original cost, or the before the alternative was something that Transource was proposing. The original cost was 383.6 million, and now the cost is 496.2 million. Can you explain why it costs more if we're using existing right-of-way and we're hanging extra conductors and we're not having to buy land and so on and so forth? Can you explain why it's more expensive?
I can explain specifically for the Transource portion, and then I can talk generally about PG&E and PPL since I can't talk for them directly. On the Transource portion, the substation that is proposed to allow connections with the 500 kV system and the 230 lines went from 2 connections, which were individually breakered, to 4 connections, which were breakered so they could operate in a reliable fashion. So what I mean by that is we went from 2 breakers, I believe, to 14 230 kV breakers, and we went from, I believe, 2 breakers to, it's in my direct, but a significantly higher portion of, here, I just get it for you directly. It's in my, I'm going to reference Exhibit BDW S2 of my settlement testimony. We went from, I believe, 3 500 kV breakers to 8 500 kV breakers. That required a significant expansion of footprint. That is a major change to a substation. As we looked at the site, which was one of the few sites we could obtain to facilitate this connection, the footprint, accommodating that large of a footprint, would have required significant excavation. And we actually ran 2 estimates. One, if we actually ran 3 estimates. One, if we built an open air substation and did excavation and fill to accommodate that footprint. We did an analysis if we used gas insulated substations, which are more expensive, but the footprint is consolidated to accommodate the 500 kV footprint. And then we looked at an option that actually did the same thing on the 230, so all GIS, or gas insulated. Based on that analysis, we determined that the least cost approach was to use gas insulated substation configuration on the 500 kV portion, but to use open air on the 230. And after all of that, there was a large increase in the substation cost for that, what I would call a very significant scope increase to accommodate that interconnection. In addition, there were approximately, let me get this right, 6 miles of total, I believe that number's right, total greenfield, which still required to be built by PPL. So these are the 2 lines coming out of the furnace run substation to get to the existing infrastructure on each side, and then the rebuilds of those infrastructures. So the combination of the lines, which were effectively, I don't think they're an exact replacement, with the increase in substation led to increased costs for the overall project. We did all we can to manage those costs down.
Okay, I appreciate that. Since we're on, I did have a question on S2. The footnotes say that for your cost you have a 2% contingency, then PPL has almost a 10% contingency, and BGE has a 10% contingency. Why is it appropriate for you to have a 2% and the other companies to have 10% contingencies?
We've been at this a lot longer than both BG&E, not as transmission in general as far as developing this project. So we've actually been able to enter into, because of that, we've been able to enter into fixed price contracts for over 50% of the line. And so based upon our current scope and the ability to get fixed price contracts and firm pricing for this for our scope, including, by the way, I should mention the 500 kV GIS portion. We feel very confident in our costs. So
Okay.
we've had more time to do this in BG&E PPL.
Okay, thank you. All right. When you were talking to Mr. Alexander, you said, I'm a little confused because it sounded to me like you said you weren't asking for approval of the settlement, but you were asking for approval of the CPCN, the waivers, and the licensing conditions. But when you go to the settlement, and you can look at paragraph 26 and paragraph 32, it says it's being submitted to the commission for approval as a whole. So I'm very confused with your position.
Yeah, and I was very confused when I read that portion before this hearing as well, and I had a conversation with counsel to explain it to me.
Conversation with counsel between the time these questions were asked?
Yes, and really, as I reread
Excuse
the
me, 1 second.
Yeah.
You had a,
No.
you had a,
Yeah.
yesterday?
Yeah.
Okay, you didn't talk about this in the hallway today?
no,
Okay.
so yeah,
All right,
please,
it just,
no.
that's, it
I was
sounded like that.
I assure
just want to make sure we're not having hallway conversations with our witnesses. 'cause,
no, I was appropriately shunned during the bathroom break.
Okay,
yes.
excellent. Shunning is excellent in that situation. Okay, please proceed.
So in preparing for this hearing and rereading the agreement, I'd asked that same question, and as explained to me, again, this is a little bit of a legal interpretation. The provisions, as outlined in section 32, asking for the approval as a whole, would only really apply to the commission, to the paragraphs which the commission is named. And so as we went through the licensing conditions, the CPCN, and the waiver, those are the only paragraphs that I'm aware of that the commission is we will ask the commission to apply. Candidly, I think we probably could have written that a little bit differently, but that's the legal interpretation I received from that paragraph.
Okay, so so it's your position that anything that doesn't have the word commission in it isn't something we need to approve. Is that what I'm hearing?
That's my understanding.
Okay.
Again, this is a kind of legal and contractual interpretation, which is why we clarified in testimony that the legal costs that were being asked about we weren't seeking commission approval.
On page 2 of your settlement testimony, not the reply, the settlement, Mr. Alexander asked you about this. I just want to clarify the 844.8 million on lines 13 through 14. When you talk about surrounding regions, is that all of PJM?
Sorry, can I get there real quick?
Sure,
Page 2.
page 2.
And trying to find the surrounding regions. Would
Sure,
you?
it's on line 14. Sentence starts on line 12, the market efficiency.
Is this my reply?
No, it's your
Oh.
settlement testimony.
Sorry.
Oh, it's okay. Page 2. Take your time.
Thank you for that clarification. So, no, that is not all of PJM.
It's not all of PJM,
No.
it's parts of PJM.
It is parts of PJM. Many of these parts are the surrounding states.
Okay, appreciate that.
Yep.
Let's see. If you, well, I think that one's been answered, okay. So, on page 8 of your initial testimony, at the bottom of the page, it says that you anticipate beginning construction in the second quarter of 2020. Is that possible?
Upon
I
receipt
guess
of,
it's possible, I mean,
yes.
but you've got to get Pennsylvania and Maryland approvals.
We do.
And then go,
yes,
before you even start breaking ground, and some of the licensing conditions say you've got to get sediment control and so on and so forth. Got to get all of that. So is that a realistic number?
So I've reviewed that with our project manager, and he's comfortable with that date. It certainly, as you point out, it requires commission action in both Maryland and Pennsylvania. One of the reasons I referenced earlier, the fact that PPL has received 100% of the greenfield, the new greenfield portions in Pennsylvania. We felt that it was best to get 100% before we submitted, to allow for what we'd expect to be expedited treatment in Pennsylvania to deliver the state. We don't control the commissions. We don't plan to act outside of our authority. So we would certainly wait for approvals in both commissions.
Okay, is there a time frame in Pennsylvania? Is there a procedural schedule for the new filing? Do you know?
My understanding is that will happen in mid-March.
A procedural schedule will happen in March.
Yes.
And that's just setting up when there's going to be hearings and testimony and so on and so forth, right?
Yes, and we've been in active dialogue with the administrative law judge on that, so she's aware of the notice periods, and we've gone through the public input. PPL has gone through the public input process as well.
Okay. Now, there's been a couple of dates being flown around here for the IEC East in-service date. Your testimony on page 9 says May of 2022, and then your reply on page 3, I believe, says February, and then you just said March earlier in your discussion. So just help me understand which is the right date.
So our current projected in-service date, and we need to look at the reply reference, is May of 2022 for the IEC East portion, and March of 2021 for the IEC West portion. There's been significant work done on the west portion, and there's not a requirement to order the gas insulated substation.
Okay.
So we feel we can deliver that project.
Right. So
Sooner.
your reply testimony in line 20 says eastern portion of the IEC project is February 2022, so that should say May.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you for that.
So,
Actually, sorry.
Go ahead.
Can I clarify?
Sure.
This is actually, I should say March. I believe that was, so it's March of 2022. This, it's the end of February. It's really, so I believe the project schedule is March 1, and it's the end of February. So that should actually, to align, should say March, to be clear. But
Okay.
it's not a material
Okay.
change. But sorry for that misunderstanding.
So on page 12 through 13 of your initial testimony, you estimate the total cost for constructing the alternative to be 195 million. Is that the BGE and PPL numbers combined? Is that what that is?
So I think it'd be,
No, that doesn't look right.
yeah, it's probably
What
best.
is that number? I mean, I'm confused as to that, because that number doesn't. I've got 195 million. Oh, I see. It's at the bottom here. That's that number at the bottom of BDWS2, the
That's correct.
195.
Yes,
That's just for the east portion.
that is. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yes.
I answered my own question. On page 13, I'm a little confused. On line 14 through 16, you say with the IEC project as described in the settlement, Commission not only has even more information upon which to conduct an alternatives analysis. Are you suggesting the Commission should conduct an analysis of the alternative?
No, as I read that, I meant that to say the commission can analyze the alternative analysis done for this project, which the settlement proposal incorporates the support of commission staff and PPRP and the coordinating agencies in that analysis.
Okay.
Yes.
Moving on to the settlement itself. BDWS1. Couple of questions. On page 3, you talk about, right in the middle of the page, about these are whereas licensing conditions they're working on for BGE and for Transource. Those are the licensing conditions that are attached to Mr. Kelly's testimony. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And those are, those have been agreed to by Transource?
Yes.
Okay. So, in paragraph 9, it says that Transource and the others are looking for a discretionary waiver of the CPCN requirements for BGE for good cause. Can you explain to me, in your view, what that good cause is?
Yes, and I would ask you to supplement my answer with the BG&E witness, since they're also working toward that. But the good cause we would request is the settlement proposal balances the socioeconomic and environmental considerations, as well as the significant market efficiency and reliability benefits that the settlement also brings to the state of Maryland. And so the good cause waiver allows the settlement proposal to move forward in a timely fashion to ensure that those reliability violations are not incurred, and we can move collectively, since all of these projects work in tandem, we can move collectively and expeditiously to realize those benefits.
Okay, thank you. All right, almost done. Thank you.
Bless you.
I'm just curious, were there any cost changes to your estimates for building the IEC West portion, which is what you're building, after you saw the conditions from PPRP? Because the settlement was filed before you actually saw the licensing conditions.
Yes, I just no, there have not been cost changes. We have I just reviewed with the project manager the overall costs, and we feel comfortable we can deliver the IEC West within the costs that were put forward.
Okay. That's all I had. Thank you very much, Mr. Weber.
Commissioner O'Donnell, follow up?
Just a quick follow-up on the nature of what you're asking us to approve. I read 32 as saying this settlement agreement is submitted to the commission for approval as a whole, period. You seem to suggest we're approving parts of it, but not other parts of it. And are you suggesting that we don't have authority to change things that don't have our name in them?
No, certainly not. I just didn't want to presuppose, any additional bindingness of this agreement, or bindingness is not the right word, applicability of sections of this agreement to expand them beyond the specific sections which outline what we anticipate to do with the commission.
So just to be clear, we can accept this agreement as a whole, we can reject this agreement as a whole, or we can modify anything in this agreement that we, at our discretion, wish to, right?
I think
And then the settling parties have to decide whether or not they're still bound by the agreement, if we do.
yeah, I won't speak for the commission on what the commission can and can't do, but the commission can certainly act to impose conditions on any CPCN. Yes.
I appreciate that. I'm not sure what council told you, but we'll figure that out later, maybe. Thank you.
Any questions from the parties in response to the commissioner's questioning? Mr. Alexander?
I just, first of all, want to do, if I may, a housekeeping.
Okay.
And I just want to make sure I did this right. I know that I introduced as an Exhibit 18 DR response 38-02.
You did?
All right, what I'd like to know is I believe we discussed 36-13, 26-07, and 26-04. And if that's accurate, then I would like to have them identified as 19, well, 30
Well, that time has passed, Mr. Alexander. We marked the Pennsylvania letter for judicial notice as 17, and then we marked, but you did not move into evidence, OPC 38-2.
so I can't move that into evidence? Is that,
You should have moved it into evidence at the conclusion of
Yes,
the cross
okay.
of the witness. But
Okay.
if you want to move it in now, we can move it in now.
thank you.
Okay, any objection?
No, Your Honor.
None.
And
Okay,
Now I
18.
just have 2 or 3 follow-ups. You have your response to OPC 26-07, and we discussed that briefly, correct?
26-07.
Yeah, OPC settlement DR 26-07. And, Your Honor, this is in brief response, follow-up to Commissioner Herman's
Thank you.
questions.
Yes, I see 26-07.
Oh, Your Honor, it's also tied into a question of Commissioner O'Donnell.
Okay.
Same thing. Okay, would you go to attachment 1, which is the next page?
I'm there.
Okay, is everybody else there? You were talking with Commissioner Herman about the cost estimates, and so I just want to briefly ask you 1 or 2 questions.
Yeah, I would just note that
Yeah.
this is actually, I think, identical to Exhibit BDWS2.
It is.
Yes, okay. That, first of all, Transource itself is building the Furnace Run substation, correct?
Yes, that is the expectation.
Okay, and so just shy of 126 million is the cost that Transource, the capital cost of Transource to build the Furnace Run, and Transource will receive a return on and of just shy of 126 million as an estimated cost, correct?
I believe those are 2 different questions. Our current projected capital costs are 125.9 million. As to what the exact return on and of under rate making, that's not this data request nor outlined here. I don't know that exact number.
I'm sorry, I'm sorry if I'm unclear. I didn't ask about the amount of any return on and off. I'm just simply asking you, is this the amount for the IEC East that Transource will receive a return of and a return on?
So this would pertain to Transource Pennsylvania, and Transource Pennsylvania would expect that all prudent costs associated with the construction of the Furnace Run substation would be put into rates and recovered appropriately under Federal Energy Regulatory Commission rate making.
Okay. And the greatest part of the IEC East is the Furnace Run substation, correct, in terms of dollars?
It is the largest part, yes.
Okay. And Transource, I think you just said, will build the entire IEC West, correct?
It depends how you define the IEC West. Project 9A includes terminal upgrades on the substations, and there's some reconductoring work, but Transource would build the Rice substation and the 230 kV line between Rice and Ringgold.
Okay, so I'm just making sure that IEC East BGE will be constructing that part of the line in, if this is approved, in Maryland, and PPL will be constructing the line in other, and not the Furnace One station, in Pennsylvania. So my question really is there any utility other than Transource Maryland and Transource Pennsylvania that will be building the Transource West?
Transource, I mean, I don't know how to answer that question specifically. I mean, there are other involved utilities as part of the IEC West project that were required for terminal upgrades, reconductoring associated out of the Ringgold substation. The facilities I answered previously are the ones that Transource Maryland and Pennsylvania would construct.
Okay. And just doing some simple lawyer math, based on the new estimates, 200, 400, something like 260, 70, or $80 million is the cost of the IEC West, correct?
Your Honor, I'm going to object. I don't see how this is in follow-up to any commissioner's questions.
Yeah, the commissioners discussed cost generally,
Okay.
but let's not do math here, Mr. Fields. Mr. Alexander. Sorry, Mr. Fields. Is that it, Mr. Alexander?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay.
Don't blame Mr. Fields for me, please.
Any additional questions based on the commissioner's questioning? Thank you. The witness may step down.
Thank you.
Why don't we take a lunch break at this point? Is 45 minutes sufficient for the parties?
Yes.
Okay. We will reconvene at 1:30.